There's a report today that the Taliban military chief has been captured and that he has in fact been interrogated both by CIA operatives and Pakistani intelligence. Do we have any idea where this guy will end up?
First of all, Harry, I can't confirm or deny that. I can't comment on that. But I can tell you we've made significant progress against the leadership of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But that's all I'm at liberty to comment on.
All right, fine. Let's talk about the economy. We're right at the one-year anniversary of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, also known as the stimulus package, $787 billion price tag. Are Americans getting their bang for the buck from this?
Absolutely, but I don't think they realize it. Number one. Number two, it was designed to have two stages to it. We've only been halfway through the act. The job-creating portions are really loaded at the second half here in the major projects that are going to be being built. But yes, they have gotten their money's worth.
When it was sold to the American people and sold to Congress, one of the selling points was, without this, the unemployment rate is going to go to 8%. Well, we got it, and the unemployment rate has gone above 10%.
That's true.
What was wrong with the math?
What was wrong with the math is we, along with every other blue chip analyst and all the industrial analysts, all the business analysts, didn't have any idea the economy was going to shrink over 6% the first quarter we got in office, that it was already in the tank. And so everyone underestimated the depth of the recession, number one. Number two, though, because of that Recovery Act, we ended up in a situation where we have created 2 million jobs so far, or saved 2 million. And people say, well, Joe, how the devil can say that you lost 8 million? We would have lost 10 and not 8. Less bad is not good enough. But the truth is, it has had the impact that's positive. And this last quarter, within a year, we've grown 5.7% the last quarter. So it has had a profound impact, but it's hard to, if you're sitting at your kitchen table, Harry, you don't have a job, or you're in that diner we're in today, and you're one of the people that's unemployed, you don't want to hear about numbers. You want to, where's my job?
Right.
Nothing's working unless I got my job.
So what's the answer to that?
The answer to that is that it took us a long time to get in this hole. It's going to take us a while to get out of this hole. And already, though, we're here sitting in a facility that's added 1,000 jobs, green jobs, going to be adding a lot more, not all because of the Recovery Act, but a significant portion of it because of the Recovery Act and the stuff we've done. And people in Saginaw, Michigan here, where they've been badly, badly hurt, they're beginning to see growth. We sat with a businessman today who's taken his business and expanded from roughly 400 employees to roughly 1,000 employees as a consequence of being able to get credit because the SBA came in, Small Business Administration came in and convinced the local bankers, lend them the money, we'll back it up. So things are beginning to move, but if you don't have a job, it's hard to associate with any of this.
Which your critics would say the administration made a maybe even fatal miscalculation in the beginning to spend so much time and energy on health care when in fact it really was the economy and it really was this hemorrhaging of jobs. As you said, 8 million since the recession started.
Harry, we had to try to walk and chew gum at the same time. The reason why there was so much emphasis on health care wasn't just that people who don't have it need it and those who have it have to keep it. It was to affect the long-term debt. We're in a situation here where if we do nothing about that cost curve, in the last 10 years, healthcare costs have gone up 100%. What people don't realize is 47 cents in every dollar spent in healthcare in America is spent by the taxpayer, the federal government, for Medicare and Medicaid. And unless you bring that cost curve from going like this, down like this, we're in deep trouble. So we had to think in terms of immediate help to the economy, stabilizing it and beginning to recover, and how to deal with the long-term accumulating debt. And so I think we had to do what we did.
If your calculation is right, the 2 million jobs have been recovered as part of the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. 8 million have been hemorrhaged out. There is still, this is still a drop in the bucket relative to the need for more jobs. does there need to be another economic stimulus, or does there need to be a significant jobs bill?
Well, two things. We're only halfway through the Recovery Act. So a lot of jobs are going to create it this following year. It was designed to come out in stages. It was a 2-year bill. Secondly, there is still another need for an additional jobs bill and additional tax credits and tax cuts to small businesses to create jobs. So we can't just say, okay, we're going to create another 1.5 million with the Recovery Act, which we believe we will, on target this coming year. But we have to also say there's additional things that have to be done. So that's why we're going to small businesses and saying, look, for every new employee you hire, we'll give you a $5,000 tax credit. That's why, for example, talking to the guys we talked today at lunch, the guy who doubled his business, the bankers who were there from Citizens Bank, they said they think there's a lot of businesses waiting to expand, but are a little bit worried, but if they're induced by the tax credit, will move up now and hire people. And so we want people being hired now for 2 reasons. One, to alleviate the pain of those unemployed, but 2, to generate confidence. A lot of this has to do with, okay, when's the fever going to break? Okay, we're growing now. The housing market isn't tanking. The financial institutions are stable, but I still can't borrow money. I still can't get the business going. We want to jumpstart that because that has a virtuous cycle, as the economists say to it. You know, things
Do you
begin
really
to
feel that that's part of what's happening now? There is a sort of malaise. There is a kind of a sense that we're in this thing and we don't sort of have it in our collective psyches to get out of it?
No, I don't think so. I think the American people are pretty darn smart. I think they know this is going to take time, and I think you're beginning to see businesses respond. You're beginning to see, I mean, I've been in the 60 towns now across America doing this, and every single place I go, we heard it at diner today. Hey, look, I want to expand. I'm ready to go. I can't get any credit. I've never not been able to borrow. I've paid all my bills. I've never been in this spot before. I go to the bank, and that's why the president said, okay, we want to take $30 billion of basically loan guarantees and give them to small businesses because they're the ones that create the jobs. So I think it's almost, Harry, it's like, I know it's going to get better, but God, I'm almost afraid to, I feel it, but I'm almost afraid to invest. There's that, as opposed to, oh my God, this is going nowhere. We're just in a hole. There's no way out.
What's wrong with the system, though, where the big banks that cause so many of the big problems to begin with end up getting bailed out? And they're the ones who really are the ones who have their fists on this credit market. And the guys down the food chain who's saying, I'm ready to go to work, I need the capital to go to work, they're not letting go of the money.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things wrong with the system. Number one, these banks we actually lost $2 trillion in this economy because of this recession. I mean, it got lost. It's not like it got put in a shelf and you can call it back. Number one. Number two, these big banks, now that they've been stabilized, are very leery about getting engaged in anything that's not.
Don't they owe it to us, though? Because in fact, we're, as taxpayers, helped bail them out.
We sure did.
Don't they owe it to Main Street to get the grease going again?
Absolutely, I think they do. But that's why we want to take that money they've paid back. By the way, now those big banks have paid back most of that money. We're going to get it all back with that surcharge on them. That's why we want to take $30 billion of the so-called TARP money and this time do the same thing for mainstream banks. The guys who lend money to the guy who runs the drugstore, the hardware store, the small plant, the people who create the jobs. And so that's how we don't have time to wait around.
Right.
Look, if you're a big operation, you don't have a lot of money, a lot of problem borrowing money right now. There's a lot of liquidity out there in the banks, $1 trillion sitting out there that they can lend. But they're only lending it, those big guys, to the big guys. We've got to now do the same thing for the small banks.
There's a lot of anger and anxiety and even animosity out around the country. Sure. Unemployment hovering around 10. The real unemployment number is probably closer to between 15 and 20%. there's a sense, you look at these numbers in terms of distrust of Congress, distrust of Washington, period, are phenomenally high. People don't think you or a lot of other folks in Washington get it. Does the Obama administration get it?
We get it. We understand why they're angry. Look, we are in good shape compared to the Congress. No one in Washington is in good shape. You know what I mean? It's
at
like,
a 45% approval rating versus,
yeah. But what is it, 20, 18, or whatever? That's no solace. What it reflects is, though, the reality. It reflects the reality that Washington right now is broken. The Congress is kind of broken. At the first time, Harry, I said this to you off camera. I've been in and you've covered the Congress for a long, long time. I don't ever recall a time in my career where to get anything done you needed a super majority, 60 out of 100 senators.
Right.
You can block anything with 60, if you need.
You said to me at lunch, you said you've never seen it this dysfunctional.
I've never seen it this dysfunctional.
Whose fault is that?
Well, what I don't want to do is I'm trying to get the other team to cooperate, to get in the game here a little bit. I understand the political motivation, but I think people say the message out of Massachusetts election was to the Democrats. I think it was to everybody in public life. And it was, hey guys, get your act together, get something going. That's why, Harry, I think you're going to see our Republican friends for the first time joining us in creating a jobs bill. That's why the President of the United States invited Republican leadership down on this health care thing. To actually say, okay, guys, what do you want?
But, that happened last week. They got together. They said, all right, here's our $85 billion jobs bill. And Harry Reid said, well, that's good that we agreed on this, but I'm really only going to do a $15 billion one. Well, and already with the offer on the health care for later this month, the Republicans say, well, do we even have to show up if they're not gonna really listen to what we have to offer?
Well, we're gonna really listen to what they have to offer, as long as it speaks to four things. One is you're gonna bend the cost curve so it doesn't go up 100%. You're gonna tame the insurance companies so they don't keep taking advantage of people. And you're gonna allow people who have health insurance not to be in a position where they goes up 20, 30, 40%. If any suggestion they have that accomplishes those ends better than we have, we're wide open.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
It's optimism is an occupational requirement, but I actually am
As
optimistic.
an old Joe Bidenism.
Well, actually, it is, unfortunately, but it is true. I mean, look, this is not a business to be in if you're pessimistic, but I am optimistic because I think the American people's frustration is overflowing. People are getting it. Get something done here.
You said you've never seen a Congress like this, and in your lifetime, have you ever sensed that this kind of unease among the American people?
Well, I have. I mean, when I ran in '72 as a young man, when I was 29, get elected to the Senate, the frustration with government over the war in Vietnam. During the period when we had stagflation, I saw it even stronger than this. You saw the phenomenon of Ross Perot as a consequence of this kind of. So I have seen it before, but in a sense, because I've seen it, I'm optimistic we'll come through it.
All right. I watched with great interest over the weekend the verbal sparring between you and Vice President Cheney, who you've known for a long time.
Over 30 years. You
like him?
I do like him. I honestly do. I mean, everybody keeps trying to, and when they ask him the same, he says the same. It's real. I mean, he's a really smart guy. He's really a patriotic. I just think he's wrong. He thinks I'm wrong. I think he's wrong.
Do you think his criticism is based in his patriotism or in his politics?
I think look, I never question another man's motive. I really do. I learned that from Mike Mansfield 36 years ago. But I do think that there is a bit of rewriting of history here. There is a desire, and it's totally understandable, I think, maybe not even conscious, to say, look, what I said and what I did was right. I mean, it's almost like he forgot he left us a $1.3 trillion debt. There were 2 wars going on, one that was ignored, one wasn't going all that well.
Well, most of his criticism is based on the issue of terrorism. And he basically says, we don't feel like you guys are taking it seriously now.
Well, look, we have made more progress in dismantling the hierarchy of Al-Qaeda Central. We have devoted more resources to beefing up our homeland security. And we have been more on top of this terrorism sort of metastasizing, like you see Al-Qaeda, the Arabian Peninsula, going to, lone wolves as opposed to these elaborate schemes.
Right.
And I think the fact, Harry, evidence of our success, it's kind of interesting. He said, well, if Biden says we're not as likely to have another 9/11, it must mean they're not concerned. The reason I say it is I know the success we've made against the Al-Qaeda Central, these complicated networks. And evidence of that is now they're going to lone bombers as the means to get there. I'm more worried about and harder to detect, and I'm very concerned about a terrorist attack in the United States along the lines of the Christmas Day bomber. You get a disgruntled student, someone who has some relationship with the United States, who is able to be recruited quickly, able to be indoctrinated quickly, and they say, okay, basically, here's a bomb, go do it, as opposed to the kind of planning that's needed to pull off a very complicated 9/11. Am I less worried about an attack? No, I'm worried. Am I less worried about a catastrophic event? Yes.
Couple of quick questions about you and President Obama.
Yep.
Have you changed in the last year?
I think I have. Not in any fundamental belief, but in understanding what the role was. I mean, it takes a while to realize that anything you say is attributed to the other guy. Look, my power as vice president is simply reflective. The president of the United States is the boss. And so what I have found is the more I give him my advice privately and confidentially, the more I'm listened to, and the more significant responsibility I'm given. So it's ended up working out well, but I've been a senator for 36 years, and I never was in this position. And I think the president is in the same situation. I mean, he was ready to step in as president, as an executive, but having to work as a team, it just takes a little bit of getting used to. And I think we make a really good team.
What's the most important thing you've learned about him in the last year actually working together?
How absolutely unflappable he is. I mean, this guy is unflappable. And he wants to hear every side of the argument. He doesn't want yes men. I mean, he kids and says the reason he has Joe, he knows he'll always tell him what he thinks. Well, it's not just me he seeks that from, but the guy listens. He is very, very practical, and he makes a decision and he moves on. He's a real leader. I mean, he's unflappable.
People would say he's too cool, though. That shows too much detachment.
Well, I make up for that, as my critics point out. Look, I think his style is cool, but this is a guy who feels.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's, you can't go through his life experiences and suggest that this guy, doesn't bleed, doesn't have a heart. But he is very, very, cool. That's very, very presidential. And the joke is, I make up for that.
There's a yin and yang there. Yeah.
Right.
Very quickly, you've spent so much time in Iraq over the years. Elections are coming up. There's this whole raft, hundreds of candidates who were vetted and basically deemed unworthy by the Shiite government in the Shiite government process. These are people who had ties to the Ba'athist regime. Will Iraq get the election it needs if these people are not allowed to run?
Yes, for two reasons. Most are going to be allowed to run. There were over 500 that were disqualified. It's going to probably be less than 120 who are ultimately disqualified. What people don't know is that more Shia were on that list of disqualified than Sunni. So the irony is the Shia government had more people who were Shia disqualified. So what's happened is there has been what I'm amazed at and pleased with. And as you know, I've gotten to know every one of these guys pretty intimately, and they actually are resolving their problems politically, as instead of, you know, using bombs. I mean, all the attempts by Iraq al-Qaeda, all the attempts by the extremists to get them going after each other again have, knock on wood, failed so far. And so I think the test is going to be this, Harry. If the Iraqis view the list, and there's 6,000 candidates, possibly as many as 125 will be disqualified, I think it's going to be viewed as a totally legitimate election in Iraq. And I think that will be reflected by equal parts of Sunni, Shia, Kurds showing up to vote. And I think, talking with Melkert, who is the UN guy there, who's really very good, I think the international community is going to view these as legitimate elections. And that's the ultimate test. Should some of these people have been disqualified? Probably. Should some not be disqualified? Probably. But in the scope of things, out of 6,000 people standing for office, I think you're going to see this viewed as a totally legitimate election.